Okay, I think we'll start now. As the audience keeps coming in, I'll welcome everyone. A very good afternoon. I take great pleasure in welcoming you all today to the webinar based on the NESET Analytical Report, Community Engagement in Higher Education, Trends, Practices and Policies. The welcome goes out to those of you who are joining us via Zoom, YouTube and Facebook. So building inclusive and connected higher education systems, engaging with communities in the development of their cities and regions, contributing to development strategies, cooperation with businesses, the public and voluntary sectors, or supporting public dialogue about social issues. This is what it's all about, and this is what we want. To do this, we must bring higher education and society closer together. We all have to work together to reinforce the role of higher education institutions to do more than what we currently do. And this is what our learners want, what the next generation aspires. How can we achieve this? Our distinguished speakers and panelists assembled here today will share their insights. Today's speakers and experts include Professor Alan Hazelcorn, Professor Snejana Prijic-Samardzija, Professor Marike Hopman, and Dr. Thomas Farnell. They're all delighted to see so many of you interested in this topic. Dear audience, I hope that you'll join the speakers. I join the speakers in inviting you to post your comments, questions, ideas, and thoughts. Please feel free to engage with the speakers and share your views in the chat window. We will try to address as many questions as we can in the second half of this webinar. To kickstart the event, the audience, I would like you to see the Mentimeter question. We will kickstart with that. The Mentimeter is a live interaction tool which will allow everyone to participate and instantly see the results. We will use this tool several times throughout the event and will reflect on the opinions that you provide. To submit your response, please go to mentimeter.com and write in the code which is provided here at the top of the screen. I hope you can see it. The code is 29065380 and it's menti.com. So to kickstart, like I said, let's get to know which sectors you represent. So which sector do you represent? Policymakers, higher education institute managers and administrators, are you professional staff, academic staff, students, civil society organization members, or other? So please let us know where you do come from, which sector you represent. So as you complete this question, I'll take the opportunity to welcome the author of the report, Thomas Farnell, to the platform. Welcome, Thomas. It is a pleasure to have you here with us.
Good afternoon. Hi.
Thomas Farnell is a higher education policy expert. He works at the Institute for Development of Education in Croatia. Thomas will discuss his report, Community Engagement in Higher Education, Trends, Practices and Policies. Participants, you'll find the link to this report in the chat window. It will be posted there shortly. This report was peer-reviewed by Professor Alan Hazelcorn and Professor Dragana Avramov, who is the NESET Scientific Coordinator. Okay, now let's see where we are on the first Mentimeter question. So we see that a lot of you do represent higher education, your academics, quite a number of others as well. It seems to be, Thomas, quite a diversity that we have here. I'm certain that your report has something for all of us, irrespective of which sector we represent. Thomas, I invite you to the floor. Please present your findings. Here you go.
Thank you very much, Sumati, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm just thrilled that we're having this webinar and that there's so many people interested. And I'm also thrilled to be sharing the floor with such a great panel today and to talk about this important topic. And especially I'm looking forward to hearing the comments of our participants today about what they think about this topic. So thank you for the introduction, Sumati. I'm the author of the NESET report on community engagement in higher education. Which is available at the link on the NESET website. And the report covers broadly 4 topics, and this is going to be the topics I'm going to briefly present to you in today's presentation. So firstly, the report speaks about the relationship, the discussion about the relationship between higher education and society and how this discussion is framed in policy. The report then defines this concept of community engagement in higher education and makes the argument that this should be a crucial concept in ensuring a better link between universities and society. The report then identifies challenges to community engagement and possible policy responses to remove the obstacles that currently exist for universities to be more community engaged. Okay, so if we can start off, the central question behind the report is how to ensure that universities can contribute more to addressing the grave challenges that we are facing as societies today, and how can policies support them to do so. And of course, this isn't a new concern in itself. This concern that universities are somehow out of touch with society, and that universities focus on their 2 missions of teaching and research that's possibly of questionable societal relevance. I mean, these are concerns that have existed for a long time, probably best encapsulated in this metaphor of the university as the ivory tower separated from society. And as a response to this, actually, in the last decades, there's been a lot more demands on universities to demonstrate their societal impact and how they contribute to social and economic development. And this has been referred to as many of you know, as the 3rd mission of higher education. Now, some people don't like this term in the sense they think that it's problematic because it does suggest that maybe this mission is a peripheral mission. It's a 3rd mission after the first 2. And in a way that what the idea that the people around the 3rd mission would like to see is this. So something where teaching and research and societal needs are interconnected, they are complementary. And whether we've achieved that so far, I mean, I think we can agree that we haven't yet achieved that. So that's the challenge with the 3rd mission of higher education. Another issue is that in practice, the discussion about the 3rd mission of higher education has focused primarily on the economic impact of higher education, especially on issues related to innovation, technology transfer, and so on. Now, to be clear, there is no doubt at all that this is a crucial role that universities can play, and that such impacts can be very beneficial to us and to our societies. The problem is that we don't just need economic growth, we need social development. We don't just need technological innovations, we also need social innovation. So the question is, how can we reframe the debate about the 3rd mission of higher education to encompass these other non-economic dimensions that have been largely absent from that mainstream discussion? And of course, these include the global challenges that we're facing now, from COVID-19 to climate change, migrations, and so on, and also to more localized issues of social cohesion, social inequalities, fostering the culture and the arts, fostering more democratic and civic values. And the report, the NESET report, argues that the concept of community engagement in higher education should be the concept to frame that debate today in Europe. So what does community engagement mean? There's almost 200 of us here today. I'm sure that each of us comes with probably a slightly different interpretation of what this term could mean, especially in an international context. And I'm assuming that maybe many of you are thinking that this is primarily something local. So it's about local communities, universities, and their neighboring communities, and possibly maybe a focus on disadvantaged communities. And this is what community engagement can be about. However, community engagement can be framed in a much broader way. So simply put, community engagement can be defined as how universities address societal needs in partnership with their external communities. Crucially, we need to define what we mean by communities here. And in the same way as the broad definition of communities can also be applied here, so that we're not just talking about the localized community. We can talk about public authorities, business, civil society, schools, hospitals, from the local, but also to the global level. So this can be framed much more broadly. Now, regarding definition of engagement, the literature is quite clear here that it should not be considered as universities helping others. So that's not the way it should be framed. It's about generating mutual benefits from those partnerships. So obviously the external community should benefit, but also the academics, the students, and the universities as a whole should be benefiting from that relationship. Some of you may have encountered many different terms to relate to this, and here are a couple that, well, many that come up, including in this report. So you may have heard of civic, public, regional engagement. There's a whole chapter dedicated to this, by the way, so for those who are interested. But the argument that the report makes is that these terms are not identical. There are some nuanced differences, but what the report argues is that the previous definition of community engagement, defined broadly, can work as an umbrella term to cover these other terms, because it's ultimately about to what extent do universities engage with their external communities, whoever they may be, to address societal needs, however we decide to frame what societal needs are. So we believe that this is a good framing for this debate. What does community engagement mean in practice? Again, one could assume, approaching this for the first time, that it's maybe about activities that are additional to academics and students' primary activities, and maybe carried out occasionally, and in that sense quite peripheral, so that maybe occasional volunteering by staff or students, or charitable donations by the university, for example. In fact, community engagement can be, and arguably should be, embedded and across virtually all university activities. There are a number of frameworks that define what are these different dimensions of community engagement. A recent one comes from the project Towards a European Framework for Community Engagement, which I myself are actively involved in, and it proposes 6 different thematic dimensions of what community engagement in higher education means in practice. So I'd like us to have a look at that one by one. So firstly, community engagement can be embedded in teaching and learning. And the most common way that this is done is through community-based learning, also known, maybe better known as service learning, whereby students, it's a methodology that combines classroom instruction and students working with external communities in project-based or other work-based ways, and allowing students to get credits for that learning. In the area of research, it's about not just researching or research about external communities, but including communities in the research process. So that can be through community-based research, through in various academic disciplines. Patient and public involvement is well known in the healthcare and social care areas. Citizen science is a growing phenomenon in all areas of science, but especially possibly in the life sciences. So there's a range of ways in which universities can do this. Service and knowledge exchange refers to the other activities that academic staff carry out in addition to their teaching and research obligations, such as participating in public policy debates, in advisory bodies, in media, in projects for building capacities of communities. Students themselves are agents of community engagement. So this means outside of their core learning obligations at university, they can organize themselves through their organizations to have their own community engagement projects. At the level of university management, this is in short reflected in the extent to which a university has let's call it an open doors policy. So to what extent it makes its facilities available to external communities and resources, including learning resources. And at the level of policies and support structures, to what extent does the university actively encourage its staff, its students to be community engaged by providing them with support, by including relevant policies to that end. So this is, in short, what community engagement can be in higher education. And many of you might be thinking, is it realistic for universities to be doing all of this in addition to everything that they're doing so far? And the answer, and the one that we argue in the report, is that universities are already doing this. So universities in Europe and around the world are already working on all of these aspects. What's happening, however, is that it's mainly happening due to the intrinsic motivation of academics and university leaders, rather than this being driven by policy. And here I provide some examples. I mean, in the report there's many examples of good practice of community engagement in higher education. These are some of the networks that I reference in the report who do amazing work in this area. And so I would encourage you to have a look at what they do. So this is already happening. So in that sense, I would argue that it's not unrealistic to expect that community engagement as a principle could be embedded in university policies and practices, or unrealistic to expect that community engagement could become a standard practice in higher education. So just another way of doing good teaching, good science, good research. The problem, however, is that the environment in which universities are currently operating doesn't encourage this activity. And there are a range of reasons why this is happening. Of course, we all know that universities are operating in an environment where there's a lot of external pressure of various kinds, from decreasing public funding to a race for recruiting students, to more scrutiny by public authorities on how they perform, going into also the global rankings and league tables, the whole culture of publish or perish. So it's the current environment does not, maybe the current environment doesn't say that community engagement is not important, it just doesn't place it very high on the list of priorities. Now, even for those who would like to be community engaged, there's other forms of challenges. So for those managers who would like to be community engaged, there's other challenges such as how to manage something that's so diverse and that is so context specific. What data can we use? How can we do this in our context? So it's not an easy thing to do, especially because one of the challenges is that community engagement is notoriously difficult to measure. Now, measuring is, at the end of the day, important in policy, whether they're institutional or national policies, because you need to know to what extent are we reaching the goals that we set ourselves. And it's difficult for community engagement because it really differs on the context, geography, socioeconomic environment, what kind of institutions we're talking about, what academic disciplines are carried out at that institution. This all impacts what kind of different community engagement you are able to make as an organization. There have been attempts to create metrics for community engagement, and for better or worse, those attempts have not succeeded. There has been a new approach and a new development in Europe from the project that I mentioned earlier, the TEFSI project, which has developed a proposal for a European framework for community engagement in higher education in the form of an institutional self-reflection framework for universities. The idea is that it's a framework that it's qualitative, context specific, and allows universities to frame what they are doing in terms of community engagement and plan room for improvement, and without it becoming another league table of questionable value. So I only have a couple of, thank you, yes. Another minute or two? Okay, these are my last couple of slides. Thank you for the reminder. So what can policy do to address these challenges? In short, in a minute that I have, the European Commission is now working on its new policy framework for the transformation of higher education in the next decade. The recommendation is that community engagement should be included among the policy priorities in a way that we balance the debate between innovation and business engagement on the one hand and broader community engagement on the other. And after setting that as a goal, to support this objective ideally through new programs, but if nothing else, through incorporating community engagement into existing programs and initiatives. And on this slide is just briefly to show how community engagement can fit into a lot of sub-priorities within higher education. So discussions about teaching, about quality assurance, about inclusion, about the third mission, of course. Community engagement can fit into all those debates, and obviously in the area of research policy as well. And as my final slide, not only that, community engagement should also be a discussion when talking about policy areas outside of higher education and research. So broader areas relating to the new Green Deal in Europe, regional development, social inclusion generally, active citizenship. So community engagement in higher education can contribute to all those policy agendas. That's the argument the report makes. I'd be fascinated to hear your comments, and I'm also looking forward to what the other speakers will say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Thomas, for informing us about the reframing of the debate that's necessary. We take several points, very good presentation, I must say. The interconnectedness and the complementarity that needs to be lifted higher up, the current environment, which is not extremely conducive, and equal partnership with external communities. Let's go on. Let's find out what the audience has to say as well. You've laid a very good and interesting ground for a good round of discussions. I'd like to invite the audience to keep posting questions for the Q&A. Before we get into it, we'd like to go back to the audience. It's time for our second Mentimeter question. So again, it's menti.com. And the code is the same as the one you used just now. So if you're logged on, you will have access to the question. And it is, let us know to what extent higher education institutions in your country consider community engagement to be a priority. Is it to a great extent? Is it to a limited extent? Not at all? Or do you think it's difficult to say? Let's see how this is going. This is interesting. This is interesting results coming here. It seems like it's shifting towards limited extent. So let's give it a couple of seconds more. It does seem like it's limited extent. Okay, I'm interested to bring in the experts on this. So please join me in welcoming Professor Ellen Hazelcorn. Professor Hazelcorn is an expert on higher education engagement. She's also the author of The Civic University and many other policy papers. She'll make you think and smile at the same time. Professor Hazelcorn, what are your thoughts? What is the role of higher education? Are institutions doing enough? A re-emerging topic, a topic that needs a nudge or a push with gusto? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the introduction. Let's see, can we get the sharing up? Oh, it says there's some issue with sharing. Okay, here we go. Right, so thank you all very much. I'm going to reflect on these sorts of issues by starting with a provocation. And as universities have evolved from elite to their mass stage, so to speak, using trowel, higher education has been transformative. More and more people are participating, and it's no longer a privilege for a few, but an obligation on everyone and for society. At the same time, higher education has become more equal. In every country for which data is available, participation in higher education continues to be unequal from a social background perspective. Disadvantaged students remain overrepresented in less prestigious institutions and in particular programs. So it's not just simply a question of access, it's a question of access to what? And at the same time, as society has become more demanding, there's a growing focus on the distribution of benefits. A growing sense of inequity is undermining trust in our institutions and in people. The pandemic has exposed and exacerbated these societal tensions, and even the response to the vaccine has been quite partisan. And we see that in particular surveys that have been done, this continuing distrust, particularly between those that informed themselves, that's the top group, and who have a higher level of trust than mass population, which has a lower level of trust. And this slide is particularly looking at government and the media. Or indeed, a survey done by the European Parliament shows that the educational level is a high differentiator between people with higher levels of education more likely to choose scientists for trusted information and to trust the WHO, for example, and their national government than others. So higher education isn't an innocent victim. Academic culture itself is often focused on too many elite models and also on self-reflective modes of accountability. There's this emphasis on global excellence versus that of human capital, or basically teaching and the outcomes of teaching and community capacity. There's a focus on stratifying institutions according to teaching and research missions, which are better, and rather than integrating teaching and research. There's a focus on rewarding traditional citations or outputs rather than valuing civic and social responsibility. And in many cases, higher education institutions, universities act as gatekeepers rather than gateways for learners of all ages and ability. But higher education sits at a crossroads of public policy and society. Its role and responsibilities are more important now than ever. And hence there is an urgency about this NESET report and about this discussion around community engagement. I frame it in terms of public attitudes towards public services, under question the degree of public trust between sections of society and public interest in the use of our public resources for the benefit of society. So what are universities good for? Not what they're good at, but what are they good for? And as Thomas has said, universities over centuries have provided a wealth of facilities and engagement with their societies and communities around them. They provide educational research opportunities. They're a source of human capital, innovation, and entrepreneurship. They develop knowledge and skills for citizens to succeed, and they underpin civil society, hugely important. They engage actively with diverse stakeholders, magnet for mobile talent and investment, and they provide a wealth of facilities to their communities, galleries, sports facilities, cafes, medical schools, and so on. And here, what I'm trying to show is the way in which universities sit at the center of a complex knowledge, research, innovation ecosystem in which every area of public policy, every area that we're concerned with, from issues of gender to foreign trade, to primary schools, to science, innovation, transport, regional policy, they all have higher education at their core. It is, as the UNESCO SDG says, education is both a goal in itself and a means of attaining the other SDGs. But too often, universities adopt buzzwords. We see that in the way in which they describe themselves and what they say about what they do. But community engagement goes much deeper. It's about a holistic engagement. Again, Thomas referenced this, between universities and societies. It transforms what's previously spontaneous or ad hoc or individualist or bilateral arrangement into something that's more formal, planned, structured, and I would say strategic in the way in which an institution engages. And there are many ways in which it's characterized not just by what the university does, but how it does it. And so, again, Thomas referred to a wide range of areas, and here it affects the way in which you design and you deliver and you might assess your programs, about the student experience, the way in which you organize the university itself, it does it's how it organizes, or its professional services. A huge part of what the university is about is how it cares and how it ensures that its services are conducted well. So this leads me then to this notion of excellence, which we've too often narrowly associated with the idea of global rankings. But this is changing, and it needs to change. So take 4 ideas. We talk a lot about public value, and this asks about the contribution to society and the public good, the impact upon citizens in their daily lives. We talk, certainly the European Commission raises the term of responsible research and innovation, RRI, which asks about the effects, the potential impacts and benefits of research. Quality assurance, the European standards and guidelines, asks increasingly about student learning outcomes and societal impact. And the issues around open science is about sharing the practices of research and making the results publicly accessible. So we need then to rethink the outputs, outcomes, and impacts that we're looking at. Too often engagement is about getting the other people to understand the university or to be broadcasting what it does. We giving lectures and saying this constitutes engagement. But this approach is limited and self-serving. We need to look at it much more identification of shared objectives, moving beyond citations to consider the breadth of research in terms of promotions or recruitment of academic staff, of reforming academic and professional career pathways. And we also need to look at performance systems designed in partnership with shared national and public objectives. So the way forward is to see engagement as not only critical to the mission of higher education, but critical to society. Strategically important to embed it, and just as the TEFCI toolbox provides us with some of those tools, because ultimately our complex problems as we see with COVID require a holistic engagement and collaboration with our partners around the world and in our immediate communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hold on.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ellen. Indeed, you made some very strong points there, rethinking excellence. I take that, and I take also the need to reevaluate perhaps these rankings that we do pay a lot of attention. We both criticize and we pay attention to them at the same time. Yes, I have taken on board your point, more formal, structured, and strategic thinking on community engagement. Audience, join me again to thank Ellen. She stays with us. She will be here for more to take your questions. Please continue to share your questions. I see them coming in. Also your links. We're learning a lot about service learning that's coming in, links from Latin America. Very interesting. Please do post. Keep posting them. So our next speaker is Professor Snejana Prijic-Samardzija. She is a rector at the University of Rijeka in Croatia and one of the leaders of the UFE, Young Universities for the Future of Europe, European Universities Alliance. She will give us a first-hand view into how a university can practice, support, and strengthen community engagement. We're eager to hear your experience, Professor, in using the TEFCI toolbox. Snejana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sumathi. I'm just sharing my screen. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm definitely very much happy that I have the opportunity to share some of my infos and the key messages to all of you. Here is the plan of my presentation. Firstly, I would like just to present the UFE Alliance and to communicate our commitment to the social impact as the crucial pillar of the university transformation. Secondly, I would like very briefly to present my university, University of Rijeka, and our community engaged policies and practice. And finally, just to present to you how we did this TEFCI toolbox that actually Thomas mentioned before. We piloting this toolbox for tool for monitoring and developing community engagement. So I just want to inform you about our experiences and the messages. So first, probably all of you know about the European University Initiative and European universities as a key pillar of the European education area, and in setting a vision for 2025 and beyond, it is actually intended that European universities increase international competitiveness of European higher education and bring Europeans together. And our alliance, UFE, Young Universities for Future of Europe, is one of these European universities from the first cycles, one of the best of the, evaluated very highly in the first cycles. And here is our map. UFE Alliance is consisted of the 10 academic members, 10 universities from all over the Europe, and 4 non-academic members. But it is important for us that we, all members, university, academic and non-academic, are actually united by the common profile. We share the common beliefs and interests. We definitely very strongly share the mission. And one of the key pillars of our mission is definitely that we need to develop close ties to local and regional governments, triple, quadruple helix. But also we want a greater connections with and co-creation with sorry, just to move the greater connections and co-creation opportunities with our citizens, and definitely we are very much devoted to the idea of European citizenship. So, University of Rijeka, just a few photos from Croatia. We are comprehensive public higher education institution, but what is important here is that we are strongly institutionally committed to the community engagement for years. We were the first university in our region who actually invented or established the Rector's Awards for our students, active in community engagement. We recognize the competencies our students gain through community-based engagement. So we have, let us say, a tradition of community engagement. But what is more important, or the most important for our present purpose, is that we are the member of this TEFC Erasmus Plus project in community engagement, and now we are the member of the follow-up project SHEPTI, who actually is kind of development of the very successful first project. And I would like to communicate here that my university is definitely strongly intends to contribute to the policies and practice of the UFES, Community Engaged University, by placing the D steps toolbox high on the UFE agenda. Of course, it is not the only activities of the UFE. We are very active in our overall project. We aim to build a robust university and city community. We are very much devoted to the sharing our expertise with the other universities in the UFE Alliance. And for instance, University of Antwerp in our network has already decided to apply the TEFC toolbox as we did. We have the UFEring, Marike after me will tell you more about that, but also this is the Horizon 2020 project aimed between other things to the community engagement, to develop the community engagement based research and education. But my idea is to share with you, our experiences about the TEFC toolbox, because I think that this is definitely very precious tool for the development of the community engagement at the university, or to develop community engaged universities. What does the TEFC toolbox empower universities to do? To better understand community engagement, to discover and map their existing community engagement practices, to identify and raise the visibility of community engagement, reflect upon the activities, present activities, but only the concept of community engagement, and plan future steps for furthering university community engagement. Thomas mentioned before the 7 dimensions of community engagement, and the TEFC toolbox is actually built on these 7 thematic dimensions, and the TEFC toolbox actually maps 7 thematic dimensions within which university community engagement activities can take place: teaching and learning, research, service and knowledge exchange, student initiatives, management at the level of the partnership and policies and support structures, and the supportive peers. So it's a very comprehensive toolbox, let us say. And just a few key messages from our experience in piloting TEFSA toolbox at the University of Rijeka. We are not the only university that piloted this toolbox. It is also piloted in Dresden, Twente, and Dublin. Involved a lot of our students, staffs, communities, colleagues from the community, and definitely the toolbox quality is very, very strongly confirmed. In our piloting report, we actually analyzed 45 existing practices within the framework of these 7 dimensions and actually 71 subdimensions. It's very comprehensive and sophisticated tool. And finally, we had a piloting visit, and actually we had the opportunity to discuss Rijeka piloting team with the peer reviewers and external experts. And for instance, we mentioned that, and we discovered that we have a lot of very, very good practices. For instance, remap matching platform. It's the nucleus of the future youth and citizens portal. This is our platform for direct contact between citizens, entrepreneurs, and researchers, through which they communicate challenges, needs, and expertise. And also the oldest community engaged activity is the University for the Third Age, educational program for the silver generation, aiming to cultivate social inclusion generally. And also we are very proud of our community-based teaching and learning courses. There is a lot, 45, I said, activities we mentioned, we analyzed in our TEFSA toolbox, mainly in the domain of science popularization, tourism and cultural heritage, because our city is definitely very important and very known by our industrial cultural heritage, in domain of public health and the empowering our students. So we analyzed, we detected, we reflected upon our activities in the domain of community engagement. And finally, we got the results. We got the infos about the areas of strength. For instance, here are our domains, our areas of strength. And we also, I know that, probably I need to finish. For instance, just a few infos about that. We got very good infos about the strong leadership, that we have the strong leadership support for community engagement, that this is our strategic choice. Also concerning our engagement culture, university research and development centers has our specific work in the domain of community engagement. But we also got the infos about the areas of lower intensity and potential for development. And you can see also that it is very helpful for our future development of the community engagement. It is very important, for instance, that we got, some good infos about the advantages, but also, the potential for the development concerning the leadership and policies, for instance. Very useful for us that we need to be better in long-term sustainability of community engagement, for instance. Also, that we need to move from the center to the periphery, that we need to branding our university in the domain of community engagement. So this is my final slide. So what is the key messages from our university to youth agenda, but not only youth, but European universities and universities all over the world? The toolbox is definitely very much comprehensive and useful, and the institution learns a lot in the process about the wealth of engagement activities. This toolbox allows for context-specific application, very, and Thomas mentioned that before, very important. The process is participative, and the participants appreciate the process. The process is holistic and developmental, and our institution learns a lot in the process about the potential of improvement. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will be very happy to discuss this more during the discussion.
Thank you. Oh, wow. You convinced me about the Tefsit tool. It is like no other. I'm impressed that the Tefsit tool includes evidence collection, mapping, participative dialogue, and more. So ingredients for a whole institutional approach to community engagement indeed. And Snezhena, it's really useful, I think, to get your first-hand experience and knowledge on this. Thank you very much. Now let's welcome our final speaker, Professor Marieke Hopman. She comes from the coordinating institution of the Youth Alliance, the University of Maastricht. Professor Hopman is the chair of the Maastricht Platform for Community Engagement Research. Her work is groundbreaking, thought-provoking, and exemplary in its integration of values that come with community engagement. She will share her experience on the important need for a culture change in our education institutions. Marieke, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for that very kind introduction. I have to admit that actually I am not a professor, although it's nice to hear that. But no, I'm actually an assistant professor, so not even nearly. Okay, I'm going to try and keep it short. Hopefully we'll have some time for questions left. I just want to make one basic argument, really. I want to argue that to develop further on the European level and beyond the community engagement in higher education, I think we need to foster a culture of community engagement at the European and actually worldwide universities. Now I need to, first, as a researcher, which is my main job, to be honest, I use a lot of community engagement, both in research and in education. This is because I believe that it leads to better understanding, for me, of a certain situation, but also believe it leads to better social impact. And for me, as a children's rights researcher, this is very important. And so community engagement really is essential to my work. Just to give one concrete example, these are two images of my latest case study, which is the study on the rights of children who are living in Sahrawi refugee camps in Algeria. And this is part of a larger study on the development rights of children who are living in unrecognized states. And in this study, we engaged children of the local community, first of all, to ask them what specific right of children should be focusing on in our study. So we hadn't decided that beforehand. We went there, we talked to a lot of children, and we basically asked them, what do you think is important for us to study? What is the main issue here when it comes to children's rights? And after we'd established that, we engaged some young people. We trained them to be translators and also to be local researchers. So they did part of the data collection for this study as well. And on the right here, the right-hand picture, you see Florentina Pirger, who's one of my students, who actually went with me to the camps. And in this picture, she is actually teaching these local researchers. So, and there's also a student team actually at the university who is were also involved in this case study. So it's really also an educational project. And of course, also in your interaction with this community, there is also an educational element, especially when we are going to travel back, which we plan to do, and share our results and teach people about, how is this useful, hopefully together with the community. So teaching together rather than to them. So research and education in this sense are intertwined. At the university level, as was already mentioned, I'm also the chair of the Maastricht Platform for Community Engaged Research. This platform was established almost 2 years ago, and its aim is to support community engaged research at the university level. You see here in the bottom of the slide, you see two examples of our latest activities. We organize regular activities. And we have been very lucky and happy indeed to be involved in the Youth Ring project and to have received funding, starting this month actually, to now build a similar platform for community engaged research, but then on the European level, for the European universities involved in the UVA project. So this is a very exciting new development. In my experience as a researcher, a teacher, and the chair of this platform, I see two main pitfalls, and I want to share these with you to keep them in mind on the way forward. First, I think partially this has already been mentioned, but I really see that there is a lack of appreciation in academia for researchers who do community engaged research and/or education. So as a researcher, you're mostly rewarded still for your academic publications. And I can tell from experience that community engagement, it costs a lot of time, a lot of energy. This is, of course, time and energy you cannot spend on academic publications. And also many of your publications might not be necessarily academic because, as you know, most communities cannot read academic publications. So you have to do both things. And at the moment, it really is a trade-off, I think, for researchers between community engagement on the one hand and academic prestige on the other hand. Second pitfall is that as long as community engagement is not considered a core task of the university, I see that initiatives are very fragile. We have this experience with our platform. Our platform has been really successful, which has been really nice. It has been growing, it's becoming more and more popular. However, we received 2-year startup funding. And then, of course, during that period, COVID-19 happened, as everyone knows, which is leading to financial issues for the university and financial cutbacks. So at the moment, we are still struggling to find follow-up funding to be able to even continue our activities. Of course, we are lucky that we can continue at the European level, but we're not sure if we can actually continue at our own university. And this European level funding, the UFA is also temporary. So there is a risk that you are creating something beautiful that works really well, but that is just not sustainable. So to conclude, I believe that we need to make community engagement at the university level sustainable. And to do this, we need a cultural change. At the moment, community engagement is really considered a luxury very often. It's something that we do when there is time left at the end of our core tasks, or it's something that a few passionate people do at the university who would therefore also have very unpromising careers. And as long as community engagement is considered a luxury, initiatives are very fragile. As I have explained, funding may come and go. I therefore believe that if Europe is serious about community engagement in higher education, then they need to foster a culture of community engagement at European universities. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant. Brilliant, Marike. I am a trained researcher myself, and I wish to show support for the research that you carry out, which focuses on social impact. It's an extremely motivating aspect that adds perspective and value. So yes, a culture change is very necessary for more community engaged research to take root and for the researchers to be duly recognized for this contribution. With this, I would like to thank our speakers for their contributions and invite you to the Q&A part. So all 4 speakers, please get ready, for which the participants, a number of them have submitted questions and are waiting patiently to engage with you. Participants, please continue to post your questions. And while you do this, we'd like to request the rest of you to reflect on the exchange so far and your personal experience. Let us know the greatest challenge for community engagement. What is it? Is it incentives? Is it prioritization or a lack thereof? Is it failure to see the relevance of community engagement? We've just heard that. Or if you have a different reply to these, please feel free to post in the chat. So the menti.com question with the code there is, what do you think is the greatest challenge for community engagement in higher education? Incentives, not prioritization. It's not considered relevant for teaching and for research staff or any other things. Okay, let's see. I just find these interesting. Yes, so we see that incentivization is coming up quite a bit on the top right now. Okay, yes. Okay, so as the results come in, Professor Hazelkorn, this is already giving you a picture. May I ask you to give us your take on this polling trend?
Hi, well, the results are actually quite interesting. I think it's a kind of a cascading effect across the piece as to how all these things fit together. So yes, incentivization at the system and government level in terms of what's a policy framework, what are the objectives for your system and for your institutions. And then I would have put higher education management really much higher, because I think that they really bear a lot of this. It has to do with how do you implement it? How are you strategic? Are you supportive? What are the ways in which you do this? And a question raised in the chat, and also I mentioned it myself, is about what about recruitment, promotion, academic careers, but also professional careers? I mean, the academics, are a core part, but so is the professional staff who work and sustain the institution. So I would have put the institutional management at a higher level. I think they've gotten off scot-free, I would have said, in this kind of response. And yes, academic culture, not considered relevant by the teaching research staff. Academic culture is incredibly isomorphic. It drives institutions, and I use that phrase, academics are not innocent victims. They are part and parcel of the issue here.
Thank you very much, Ellen. And I ask the audience to bear with us for a minute more. We post the final Mentimeter question now. And this one, audience, is where you have free reign. So please type in one word or a phrase to let us know what you think is the main benefit of community-based learning for students. What do you think? It's a word cloud. So what is the main benefit of community-based learning for students? One word or a phrase, please. And I'd like Snezhena to come on this question, and also to take up from where Ellen just left off. Snezhena, you just completed the TAFSIP tool, using it. What do you think about human resources? What findings did you have before we go on to the word cloud?
Yeah, thank you, Sumati. Yeah, according to my experience, I think that we have the words for our present situation. Or Thomas told us about the third mission of the university. We have the university of the third and even fourth generation. So the universities passed through, let us say, a long history from the middle age universities to Humboldtian universities, and now we are struggling how to define and transform universities to be more located and situated in the university. So concerning the human resources, you asked me, it depends, it was challenges on the bottom level, both side, like I say, top down, but also the bottom up involvement. What Ellen said, we need, some strong strategic, a commitment from the management, but also bottom up involvement. It's not a question of top down, decisions, but we need to, we are not innocent as the professors, so we need to recognize the new mission of the universities. Yeah.
Thank you. And we see from this picture, empathy is right there in the center. What do you think about that, Snezhena?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you for the participants of this webinar. Definitely, according to my opinion and my conversations with the students, they also stress all this element of the empathy, of the European citizenship, this kind of skill and competencies. But also very important, according to my opinion, is this experience learning. This is something very, very important. This is definitely the personal flourishing, the community engagement is the framework for the personal development, but also, to get the more practical competencies that our students grow also in this sense. Not, my students communicate with me that they need some practical competency skills, not so theoretical, but to be involved in real life. So this is the proper way to do so.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Marike now. Empowerment is another one of these words. Now, what did that project that you were doing with the students, does it show in terms of empowerment and empathy? Feel free to comment on empathy as well.
Well, thank you. In the experience of my students with this project and others that I've done, I think empathy is a very important one, because if you only do literature study, you very quickly take up a certain perspective, especially in the human rights world. You know, one is the good party and the other is the bad ones, and their rights are being violated. But if you engage with the communities, you find that actually reality is just much more complex than that. So that leads to empathy, and I would say empowerment also, in the sense of at some point they start seeing that themselves. You know, they get trained to really listen to these communities and really interact with them. And they get, of course, very positive feedback. Like, you know, you get children who are saying like, wow, you're coming to ask me what I think? I'm only a child. No one ever asks me. And, you know, people are I think that's a very empowering experience, that they actually already, just by doing it, are already, you know, creating value and contributing to something positive.
Good, thank you. I'll lead on a little bit with this. Thomas, can you comment on the creation of trust? This is from Portugal. Manuel, he says, the creation of trust is very important in community engagement. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, the answer to that is that is the main problem. I mean, and the main question about how to ensure mutual benefits, and mutual benefits means that there's really both sides are equal partners in that process, and trust is the basis for that. I don't have a magic answer of how that can get done, except that it's just a very gradual process where both sides need to be committed to that, and there may be cases where that's very difficult to achieve. So that's a really tough question, but I would confirm that it's essential, and that it requires both sides to have platforms to meet in, and to really begin conversations that can then, in time, develop trust.
This links actually to a comment from Neve Tapia. She says, sorry, maybe it's a he. Okay, Neve says, ivory towers, this is what institutions are, and this is an old concept. It's and the discussion's been going on for a long time. So this building of trust will actually release us from this ivory towers concept, I guess. Yes, Thomas?
Wait, sorry. So the question is, sorry.
It was just a comment. It wasn't a question. It's a comment about.
No. Yes. No. Okay. Sorry. I actually answered that comment in the comments myself. That yes, indeed. In fact, Latin America is one of the areas where this has been community engagement has been around for the longest, and this is mentioned in the report. So anyone wanting inspiration on how this can be done could look to Latin America and see how things are done there.
Good. I'm going to put Alan back on the spot now, because a number of questions on rankings. So, yes. Chinsena Albanese says we should build a framework to evaluate community engagement and provide new rankings. Alan.
My favorite topic of rankings. Yes, I saw a range of topics mentioned. My view is no. Rankings are not a format that's appropriate. It's basically one over the others. It's not a particular methodology that's particularly useful. And I think we need to move beyond that. I think if we want to look at either self-reflective measures, or let's go into bench learning and peer learning, and particularly the kinds of more innovative ways of looking at it. Now, that doesn't satisfy people who want to know that they're better than someone else, but that's not really where we're at. And I saw a question asked about developing new and emerging universities, indeed new and emerging universities, young universities in developing countries and so on. Rankings game is already preset for elite institutions with long lineage and big, deep pockets. This is not a methodology that's appropriate in any ways. And I will go one step further and be equally provocative. The methodology that has been put out there to try and rank institutions according to SDGs is fundamentally a research ranking. It is not a ranking that deals seriously with the SDGs, and I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay, we're going to link to Marike now, because this then links to the quadruple helix a little bit. So you're now trying to lift economic impact and societal impact. Alan has made it clear, let's just throw those rankings out the window, benchmarking perhaps. But how do you then reconcile this concept of quadruple helix as a researcher? Is this something that you think about? Something that is there? Have you heard about it? Is EU policy on this dripping down into your work?
That's like, now you're going to embarrass me here. Like, I've heard of it, but I've never really actually looked into what exactly it means. I mean, yeah, I've heard it come across as many other, it's really a policy term, isn't it? So whenever you need it in a funny application, you will probably Google it and see that you can use it. But other than that, no, I don't think it's very important as a term in my work as a researcher, no.
Okay, yes, we had, it's about, I guess, using a simpler term, perhaps, it links up to this ivory towers again. We do it, but we don't communicate enough about it. And so it just ends up as a term somewhere. You're doing it in your research, but
yeah, but I don't know, it's also a very difficult term, if I may say so. I don't know who came up with it, but quadruple helix, I mean, maybe for some physicists that might sound like, or mathematicians, but I don't know. Yeah, honestly, you hear the term all the time, but it's not very, I don't know, for me, it doesn't catch on. I'm sorry, but I feel embarrassed now because, there are so many policymakers here. And I'm sure they thought about this long and hard. And
no, don't. You are doing it. It's your research. It's good. It covers it. Okay. Let's go on to one last question. I think that's all we have time for. I'm going to direct this to Snezhena. It's how could the problem of recurring funding and funding, temporary funding, how can it address community engagement activities if we are already fighting for funding for teaching and learning and to make for universities to make themselves more visible with economic impact, and then here comes community engagement through the door and says, okay, give me money because I also need to make myself more visible. How do you reconcile that? Yeah, as a rector, yes. So you lead this, yes.
Yeah, community engagement is at my university strategic point. So we try to struggle with all these, but this is definitely the challenging issue because now, especially now when we are all experienced and expected actually the financial cuts. And when we are talking about that, the first thing that we will cut will be this kind of luxury activities. So we need to be realistic. Of course, I see that we are here completely devoted to the community engagement, and our participants at the webinar are very sensitive and for the issue. But we need to be aware that, for instance, at some webinar with the research universities or about this kind of topic, that we will, discussion will be pretty different. So they also struggle for money for the research. Now there is also we need also the money for the digital transformation of our universities, especially these kind of elements. So definitely we all here share the idea that we need to be very sensitive on the community engagement, all the benefits of the community engagement, but we need to be realistic. We need to put on the table our arguments. So concerning the ranking, the Ellen put an open, very, very hot topic. We are all very nervous and anxious about the ranking system and the quantitative metrics. We are all aware of the deficits of the quantitative metrics and everything actually Ellen put on table very, very interestingly. But we need to communicate. We need to fight for and to pursue our colleagues, our researchers, our teachers, that the community engagements definitely, bring a lot of benefits. And this is the future. The future of universities definitely in the community engagement. Quadruple helix also, so the cooperation with the business, with the entrepreneurs, but also with the civil society, also with our citizens. Definitely, this is the future of universities. I cannot see the future, behind or a part of that, but we need always to organize the webinars like that and to invite the people from different, let us say, perspectives.
Great. Okay, I think we can take one last question, and okay, let me see now. It goes to Ellen again, okay? Ellen, benchmarking versus ranking. Now, how do you balance this? How do you push it towards benchmarking and make it stay?
Yeah, I mean, they do different things. It's a bit like quality assurance. It's not the same. And I think that the bench, and I would go towards bench learning or peer learning as opposed to benchmarking. Benchmarking is really something that sort of says, how did they get there and what can I do to follow them? That's not really what we're at. Let's extend that notion that we talk about around community engagement to the core notion of collaboration, which is at the core of what we're really, and looking at partnerships between peer institutions and I use the term appropriate peer institutions, and learning from each other, the kind of network that you've been talking about, the Young University Network and the other European university networks. That's really the way, I think, the way to go, and to share practice. The rankings do something completely different. And we really need to remove that. Remember, we're in an age of mass, nearly universal higher education. The rankings across Europe include the top 100, include less than 4% of European students. We need to realize that we have 96% of our students are not going to those institutions. Where is our focus? Let's get back to the core issue that we talked about earlier about community engagement, around trust, around engagement with our communities, around sustainability, around the issues of growing support in the areas in which we're based. And that's where I think we need to focus.
Great summary. Great summary. Okay, we'll have to come to an end. Alan said it. I glanced through the chat and there was a term co-scientization by one of the participants. Good as well. Great summary. So we've come to the end. I'm sorry, participants. It's been a very, very interesting discussion. Thank you also for all your comments, which we will take note, and I do believe that it will be made available to you. From me, a few parting messages. The societal role of universities needs to be better framed to include and lift contribution to societal development. The engagement of higher education institutions must be understood in a much broader context that includes mutual beneficial partnerships with a range of different organizations, including public authorities, businesses, schools, civil society, and so on. And thirdly, due recognition and support for community engagement at the policy level, at the institutional level, at faculties, and to mobilize the resources to support this great work, which will give great positive impact in terms of addressing Europe's pressing societal needs. So I leave you with these thoughts. I'd like to thank Thomas, Alan, Snezhena, Marike for your very valuable insights. I'd like to thank the audience for your wonderful comments, for sharing your links, for your questions. A recording of this webinar will be made available on the NESET website and YouTube channels. It will reach you via a follow-up email in the coming weeks. The follow-up communication to all attendees will also include the slides presented by the speakers today, as well as certificates for your attendance. Thank you very much to all. Have a very good afternoon. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.